Hi, I'm Tom Capito, and in this segment I'm going to be showing you how to play guitar. I've been teaching guitar now for 16 years, and I've found that when new students come in, the most frustrating thing for them is that they don't know what to do with their guitar once they get it out of the box and home from the music store. So the purpose of this is to show you some very simple things you can do that are going to sound awesome and that sound very similar to the bands that you listen to. So the first thing we're going to do is tune our guitar. I tune down a half step. So if you have a tuner that has a flat button on it, you're going to want to hit that once. If you have a tuner that shows the actual letter names of the notes, you're going to want to tune E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, B flat, E flat. Or the easiest way would be just to match up the sound of your guitar to my guitar. So I'm going to start by playing through my individual strings, and I'm going to start with the thickest string on the guitar. Next one. Next. Next. Next one. And last. And just so we have the terminology correct for the rest of the lesson, the last string that I played, we're going to call that our top string. And the first string that I played, we're going to call that our bottom string. We differentiate between the two by the sound. So a higher pitched sound is our top, and the lower pitch is our bottom. Okay, so now that we're tuned, we're going to get started with some of the examples. So what I'm going to do now is play the example for the lesson. I'm going to play it at two different speeds. I'm going to play it at the full speed and then a slower learning speed. The first way that I'm going to play it, I'm going to play it 4 times, and then when we get to the slower version, I'm going to play it twice. Okay, so here's the fast version. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's what we're going to be working on, or working up to. Now here's what that sounds like slower. I'm going to only do it twice, just because when we're playing slow it's going to feel like it's twice as long. Okay, so slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'll do that actually a few more times, fast and slow, just so you can really get the sound of it in your ears. Okay, fast again. 3, 4. And slow one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's our exercise. Depending on what style of rock music you like, that may sound like Metallica to you, like a heavier band. It could sound like more of a modern band, like Disturbed. The point is that once you play this exercise, you're going to be playing something that's similar to what you listen to, and that's going to make you really love to play the instrument. So what we're going to do in the next segment is I'm going to discuss the techniques in the left hand, the fretting hand, and also the techniques in the right hand, plus some musical concepts that are going to help you to make this exercise sound the best that you can make it. So let's talk about the technique of how to play this example. What technique means is really just what your hands are doing. So it's a certain way that your pick hits the strings. It's a certain way that your fingers press down on the strings. And there's certain tricks that you can use to make something like what we're about to play sound great instantly. So we're going to start with the fretting hand, and that's, of course, the hand that pushes down on the strings. Now, slowing down for a minute for the terminology, we have on the guitar strings, and the strings move from left to right. So when we're thinking of the strings, we're going to think left to right, or right to left, depending on what we're doing. The frets then are these metal bars that go up and down. So frets go up and down, whereas the strings go left to right. Now when we play a note, what we want to do is we want to press down behind whichever fret we're going for, whichever fret we intend to play. So if I intend to play the 3rd fret, I would count up 1, 2, 3, and then press down right behind the bar there. The string that we play on will be discussed in a moment. So that's some of the basic terminology. Now, the chords that we're playing here, the 2-note ideas that we're playing here, are called power chords. So the first chord is going to be played very high on the neck, and on most guitars they're marked with 2 dots. That's going to be our point of reference. That's the 12th fret on the guitar. So we're going to put our first finger on that fret, and we're only going to be using the thickest 2 strings on the guitar to play this entire example, so we won't have to worry about switching strings. Also, when we go through the different chords, the first finger is going to be the important finger to keep track of. So if I call off fret numbers, the first finger is the one that the fret number will refer to. Now, one of the coolest things about the guitar is that it's a shape-based instrument. And what that means is if we keep our fingers spread out a certain way, we get similar sounds as we go up and down the strings. So I'm going to show you how to play the chord in a moment, but what I mean about shape is this. The power chord that we're going to play is this. So whenever I play this chord, wherever my first finger is, my 3rd finger will always be 1 string over, and it's going to be 2 frets apart. That's the shape of the chord. If I slide my first finger then down to the 3rd fret, then my other finger will retain the shape and go 1 string over, 2 frets away. And if I do that without explaining in between, you'll see that the fingers, even though they're in a different part of the guitar, the shape of the fingers remains the same. So the first chord was this. And without changing the shape, I'm just going to slide my fingers down. And we can see that the fingers are spread apart just as they were. And that's going to remain the same throughout the entire exercise. So after this chord, the 3rd fret chord, we're going to go up to the 6th fret chord, back to the 3rd, 5th, 6th, finally the 1st. Now, if you didn't retain all of the chord fingerings the first go around, that's okay, because I'm going to break that down for you again. What you can practice at this stage, though, is keeping your hand in that shape and trying it at the different frets. So that's a little bit about the notes. That's how we're going to arrange these sounds that we're playing on the guitar. Now, as far as the technique of how to grab these the easiest, we're going to check out my first finger. The first finger is the most important finger when you play this chord. So when we're up high, and high is this way because the notes become higher in pitch, whereas this way is low. When we're high on the guitar, the frets get closer together. That means we don't have to spread our hand out as far. So this first chord, this 12th fret chord, this is a real easy one to start with. So I'm going to place my first finger on the string. And when I place it on there, you'll notice that I'm not pressing down straight. My finger presses down to the side. Also, you'll notice that this part of my finger is resting flat against the strings. It's not curved up or arched up like this. So there's two elements right there to retain. The first one is that the finger is on the side, and the second one is that this part of my finger is very lightly making contact with those strings. You can check how light the pressure is by playing those strings, and if you do it correctly, it should sound like this. The only note we should hear is that 12th fret note on the bottom string. So even though I'm hitting all 6 strings, only one note sounds. That's a trick that you can use to get your chord to sound very clear and very powerful. So that's how we set that finger up. Now, what'll help you also to roll the finger on its side and have it touching the strings like we just discussed is the position of your thumb. Now I'm going to turn my guitar a little bit so that we can see the angle of the thumb. Now my thumb is kind of diagonal. It's pointing up to the ceiling, kind of on a sideways slant. You might find that having your thumb this direction with the neck will help you to roll your finger the way we want it. You might also find that pointing your thumb straight up will help you to get your hand in this position. Now, there's no right or wrong. It's whatever feels good for you, as long as you're not doing something that's just silly, you know, like wrapping your thumb completely over the neck. So straight up, diagonal, or to the side. Everyone's hands are a little different, so you have to experiment to see what works well for you. So once we find the spot where we can roll the finger, we're now going to include the third finger. Now, the thing to watch out for here is once I place this finger down, I want to make sure my first and second fingers stay spread apart. If my first finger does this, if I fret more on the flat part of my finger, you'll see how these fingers, the first and second fingers, close up. What that's going to do is pull this finger away, and it's not going to make it sound good. So, with the first chord, this is my grip. Notice that I have space in between these two fingers. The side of the finger's resting very lightly on the strings, and I'm pressing down with the side of my finger. That means I'm doing it right. As we move down the neck to the 3rd fret, notice I have to turn my finger just a little bit more on its side. That's so that I can keep that first and second finger distance the same. This enables my 3rd finger to stay right on its tip, right next to the fret. So those two movements, first one, and then my second one. And that's a good thing to practice. You want to make sure that you can consistently keep your first finger on its side, keep the space right here, and then keep the side of that first finger resting on those unplayed strings. All right, so as we go through the rest of the chords in the example, you'll notice, take note that my first finger on the side of the fingers resting on the other strings, and we have the space right here. Okay, here's my first chord. Second chord. Next chord. Next. Next. Now you will feel a little bit of tightness in your wrist when you do this. It's just because you're using muscles that you're not used to using. The way you sit with your guitar will make a difference as well. You want to sit with the guitar neck side by side with your leg. If you find that your guitar is perfectly in front of you like this, it's going to cause your fretting hand even more discomfort. You're not going to be able to move as freely. So push the neck away from you, and you'll be able to make these stretches a lot easier. So that's the left hand. Let's talk a little bit now about the picking hand, what we want to do there. So the first thing we want to do is when we play this first chord, we want to move the pick straight down to the floor. And what's happening with the tip of my pick is after I play those two strings, you can see how it comes to rest right on this fourth string. And when we count our strings, by the way, we're going to go number 6, number 5, number 4. So as the chord is played, this fourth string is my target. The tip hits right there. That gives me a definite spot to stop playing. Now when I do this slowly, that's a lot easier to do than when we play it up to speed. But we're going to worry about playing to speed later. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through the chords in the order that they're played in the example. You want to pay attention now to my right hand, my picking hand. What you're going to notice is the pick always rests on string 4. First chord. And the only change for the last note, since it's a single note that I'm playing, instead of resting on string 4, I'm going to now rest on string 5. So slowly, that's how you would train the hand to do what it needs to do. And what we're doing at this stage is something called muscle motor memory. It's the same as when you use the remote on the TV. After you do the same movements the same way enough times, you don't have to look down at all. All the muscles involved moving your thumb from 0 to 6 or whatever, they know what they need to do. So by doing what I just described, the muscles in your wrist, the muscles that hold the pick, they're going to know exactly the amount of movement that it takes to only hit 2 strings. So the cool thing is your guitar playing is not going to sound like this. Unless that's what you want it to sound like, but most of us don't, so we're not going to go for that. But when played to speed, I'm going to play it through one time. You're going to notice that my pick moves in a very controlled way. Oop, played that wrong. So without even looking, I'm able to hit just those 2 strings and I don't crash into the other ones. I'm going to do that one more time for you, just so you can really focus on the right hand. And you'll notice that I'm only hitting those 2 strings. I'm stopping short of the 4th one. So I have that control because, back when I started playing guitar, I was taught to rest the pick on the first string that I'm not going to play. So if you do that, you'll have the control as we start playing faster. Now when we do play faster, I mentioned that resting the pick on the string isn't very realistic because it'll actually slow you down. So what I do when I play faster is the pick moves in an outward C-shaped movement like this. So if we take a close look at the picking hand, what I do is after I play this first chord, the knuckles of my hand turn up to the ceiling just a little bit. And what that does with my pick, it moves the pick outward from the strings I don't want to hit. Now I'm not making big movements because that would also slow you down, but it's a slight enough movement where it brings the pick away from the strings that I don't want to hear. So that idea, together with training our muscles how to stop just on those 2 strings, that'll ensure that we don't crash into the strings that we don't want. So I'm going to do it fast one more time. Focus on the little C motion that I make with my picking hand. All right, and then one more thing about the technique. Back when I was showing you how to fret the chords, I mentioned that resting the side of the finger on the strings was very, very important. Here's why. I'm going to play through it one more time. We're going to focus on my picking again. Now, I'm going to do the picking incorrectly. What I mean by that is I'm not going to hit these 2 strings by themselves. I'm going to hit all 6 strings. The purpose of this is to show you the muting technique that's happening with this first finger. What muting is, it's using fingers of your fretting hand to touch the strings you don't want to play you touch them very lightly so that in case you do bump them, you don't hear a lot of garbage behind what you do want to hear. So I'm going to run through it once that way. Focus on two things. We're going to focus on my pick hitting all 6 strings, but when we listen to it, we're only going to hear the 2 notes that I'm fretting with my left hand. So let's check that out. Okay, fast speed. 3, 4. Now it did get sloppy when I played part of it. That's because my first finger had to come off to play. But in the ideas where my first finger was involved, all you heard was the 2 notes I wanted. So that's it. So the combination of the picking and the muting with the first finger, that'll ensure that when you play your power chords, you're going to sound quite swell. So we've talked about technique, we've talked about muting. The last element to add to our exercise is something called rhythm. What rhythm is, it's the spacing that we put between our notes that we play. Rhythm is actually more important when you play than getting the notes right. So spacing out all of these chords that we've played, hitting them with the right length of time, that's going to be our goal. So when we listen to music, we instinctively want to tap our foot. We instinctively want to bang our head. We instinctively want to tap on a tabletop. We just feel that rhythm. So that rhythm can be called a bunch of things. It can be called a pulse, can be called tempo, whatever. But what we're going to be doing as we play is we're going to tap our foot. So if I were to play the slow version of this example, it would be like so. So this is the pace that I'm playing the example at. That's the pace that I'm going to tap my foot. Now when I play, I'm just going to play a little bit of the beginning of the example. If we take what I just played and only think about when my pick hit the strings, this is what I'm doing. So what I'm doing is I'm playing 2 pick attacks, or 2 notes, whatever you want to call it, per foot tap. So my rhythm in musical terms would be called 8th notes. You don't have to retain that, but if you're looking online, looking in music books, if you're in a music class somewhere, even if you're taking lessons somewhere, and you hear that word 8th notes, that's all it means. We're playing twice per foot tap. So when we tap our foot, and as I'm tapping my foot, you can't see my foot, and that's okay, but it goes down and then it goes up. Those are 2 movements. So when I tap my foot down, we're going to call that a number. And in music, we only count up to 4, at least when we start playing music. When we bring our foot up, we're going to count and. So if I were to count along with my foot tap, it would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. After that last and of 4, we go right back to 1. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, and so on. Now, if I were to count along with the example as I was playing, here's what it would sound like. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. All right. Little mistake on the last one, but that's okay. So the whole idea here is that as we're playing, we need to count along as we play. If we don't count, we're only going to have half of the idea of what we're trying to make it sound like. In other words, it's not going to sound as good as it could if we don't learn to count when we play. The other element to this, when I played, you'll notice that when I said 3, I wasn't playing anything. Now, musically, that's called a rest. Again, you don't have to retain that. For right now, all we need to do is rest our hands. We're going to rest the fretting hand over the strings very lightly, and we're going to rest this part of our picking hand over the strings very lightly. And what that's going to do is give us a quiet sound. So I'll play it once focusing on the hands, just so you can see how that goes. What you'll notice when we have the tight shot on the hands is that my fretting hand is going to cover the strings lightly, and my picking hand is also going to cover the strings very lightly. So here's how it sounds. Okay, so what that does, it gives us a cool break in the rhythm. As we play up to speed, just makes it breathe a little bit more. Okay, so I can't stress enough the importance of rhythm when you play. It's going to be your first instinct to try to get the notes right and sounding good. Even if it sounds bad when you're playing, keep pushing ahead. The count is the most important thing. The actual notes can develop later. It sounds crazy, but trust me, it'll all come together. And more sooner than not, you'll be playing some really cool things that you didn't think you'd be able to play. So before we wrap it up, one more thing about the amp settings. When you practice this stuff, you want to play with a distorted guitar tone on your amplifier. Distortion is this heavier tone that you hear me playing with. A clean sound, I won't demonstrate because it's just not very cool, and that's not why we pick up the guitar. We don't pick up the guitar to play clean. We pick it up to play loud, mean, distorted, and nasty. So all amplifiers have different controls. Do some research online, look in your manual, figure out how to set it up, but you need to practice this stuff with this type of sound. You won't hear the muting the same way, you won't hear the pick attack the same way, and the most important thing is it's not going to be as fun. When you can crank up the amp and make it sound loud, mean, and nasty, you're going to have a lot more fun practicing. So, that's all I'm going to present to you today. This riff, very easy to do. If you spend some time on it, about a week, you should have it down under your fingers. And I will be seeing you again with another variation on this. You can get the tablature for this online at tomcapito.com. The last name is Kopyto. And if you have any questions, contact me online. But that's it. So I'm going to jam out on this riff as we play out. As we end our program, and thanks for checking it out.